Thank you. Yeah, it's, I like Darren, never really imagined myself in this position, running, let alone being a leader of a political party. But, you know, where things have gotten, they need to be addressed. The days of, I firmly believe that the days of easy politicking and smoke and mirror shows and empty platitudes are done. They're done. We've ran all over this province, and of course all over Lumsden Morse. And what you hear from people, genuine people, the real people of Saskatchewan, is we need real solutions for real problems that we're facing. Not just throwing more money at it and hoping to get a different result, but real solutions for real problems. And I just love that this party has attracted people that have never really ran in politics before or never really thought they would be in politics, but felt compelled to come. We have candidates that chose to run before they knew that an MLA was paid. Boy, isn't that the opposite? Literally, it's crazy. You know, so I'm very proud to be part of this team. That's what I've done for a living. I build teams. That's what I do. Because the problems that we face are multidisciplinary problems. No one person has the solution, but we know when we bring the right people together at the right time in the right position, that's when magic happens. And I firmly believe that Saskatchewan right now, this election, is right on the cusp of something great if people decide to seize it. That's what it comes down to seize it. Our candidates have decided to seize the moment and move forward because they want to bring real change to Saskatchewan. Real change. Saskatchewan's such an awesome place. Darren was getting into it about the urban-rural split. Saskatchewan is the last jurisdiction in all of Canada that has more rural seats than urban seats. Alberta does not have that. That's why like rural Alberta can moan and groan and whatever, but it comes down to Calgary and it comes down to Edmonton. But Saskatchewan is that last place. It's that. And I firmly believe that Saskatchewan is a beacon of hope for the nation. We saw that during the by-election. So we started the by-election last year running at 2%. We polled it, we were at 2%. We finished, we were at 23% and beat the NDP in just over 20 days worth of campaigning. Remember that Blaine Higgs, the premier, former premier, he lost last night, former premier of New Brunswick started going after the pronoun stuff and the gender things back in May of last year. Yet no premier would even talk about it. We ran an entire campaign on it as one of the primary issues. We won 23%. 8 days later, Scott Moe brings out the Parental Bill of Rights. Now, it was slapped together. You could tell they didn't put any thought to it. They just reacted. They reacted because they saw, oh my gosh, we just lost 23% of Lumsden Morse. Lumsden Morse and Arm River is the heart of Saskatchewan. That's why they are the strongest Sask Party seats. It's the heart of Saskatchewan. 8 days, Scott Moe comes out. He puts that bill together. 2 days after that, Manitoba follows suit. Another 2 days after that, Danielle Smith is following suit. And a week later, even Ontario is talking about it. That is what it means for Saskatchewan to be a beacon of hope. We can have conversations here and need to have conversations in this province that can reverberate across the country. Things like net zero and how net zero is actually the existential threat to Saskatchewan. Not climate change, but it's actually net zero. We can talk about that in Saskatchewan. Could you imagine if you had a premier, and I will get into the speech here. I know I'm just getting off on a tangent already. But could you imagine if we had a premier that actually stood up and said, net zero will be the death of my province, and therefore we refuse to go along with it. Why? Because carbon dioxide is not a pollutant, it's plant food. Not only do we agree with that, but if we were in power, we would actually declare a CO2 day as a provincial holiday. We would put on green shirts and wave green flags and, have a parade. That's how important it is to this province. But do you see how that would change the narrative? That would completely change the narrative. So that's the power that is at play here in this election. That is the power that you as the voter have. And it doesn't just affect Saskatchewan, it affects the entire country. Okay? Saskatchewan votes the most conservative per capita in all of Canada. Okay? And it's okay to be a conservative. I am proud to be a conservative. I'm proud of that. What we've seen with the Sask Party is not conservatism. Big bloated government is not conservative. Big spending is not conservative. Too many regulations is not conservative. Centralization of power in Regina is not conservative. Conservatives believe the opposite of that. So the Sask United Party is dedicated to bringing good, common sense government to the people of Saskatchewan. The Sask Party has governed for 17 years. That's nearly an entire generation. But this is no longer the Sask Party of Brad Wall. Scott Moe and the Sask Party would like to make you think that this election is about the Saskatchewan NDP and Justin Trudeau. In reality, this election is 100% about the Sask Party government and their record. Crime is at an all-time high. Healthcare wait times and services are some of the worst in the country. Our education outcomes are rapidly declining year after year, and families are struggling to make ends meet. Out-of-control spending, coupled with high taxes and failing services, have pushed hard-working Saskatchewan families to the brink. We know this is the case. You can see it in your communities. We hear it on the doors. We see it right across. Strong economy is what's being talked about, when in reality, we know it's not. We know it's not. We can feel it. We can feel it. As I've been saying since the by-election, Saskatchewan doesn't have a money problem. It has a management problem. If these issues could be fixed with more money, they would have been fixed a long time ago. We firmly believe that good management is needed to cut the waste, to streamline our services, and to protect our communities. The status quo of the Sask Party and the NDP have had plenty of time to fix these issues. Those who broke the system cannot be relied upon to fix it. New leadership is needed in Saskatchewan. Our party, the Sask United Party, was formed to offer a true conservative option to the problems that Saskatchewan faces today. Our blueprint for change is centered around the priorities of bringing affordable and a better quality of life to every family in Saskatchewan. With the rising cost of living weighing heavily on our families, it is our elected officials' duty, it's their duty to step forward with solutions that directly ease the burden on our wallets and provide real support where it's needed most. Sask United will, number one, eliminate the provincial gas tax. Number two, cut the provincial sales tax in half to just 3%. And number three, provide a 65% discount on property taxes for our seniors living in their primary residences. By cutting the gas tax, let's talk about the gas tax. By cutting the gas tax, the average family will save $600 per year at the pumps. By cutting the PST to just 3%, the average family in Saskatchewan will save $1,400 per year. That's a combined savings of $8,000 over the next 4 years. The PST cut will also be significant to housing construction and businesses who export their products out of our province. By cutting the PST, these businesses will have more capital available to invest right here in Saskatchewan. Additionally, we want to provide direct relief to our seniors, many of whom are on fixed incomes and have felt the effects of inflation the hardest. Our seniors have built our communities, They've raised our families, and they've shaped the very fabric of our province. It is time we honor them and honor their sacrifices by introducing a 65% discount on their property taxes for those ages 65 and over. When it comes to Saskatchewan resource wealth, we firmly believe that they must be harnessed to benefit our families and our citizens. Sask United views it as the government's responsibility to ensure that the wealth of Saskatchewan resources are not exploited by big business, but rather benefits Saskatchewan families and communities first. Our resources need to follow the same royalty framework as our neighbors in Alberta and give the people of Saskatchewan the benefits they rightfully deserve. There is a reason that Alberta does not have a PST. There's a reason. We are proposing a full royalty framework review on potash to ensure that the Saskatchewan people are receiving fair and equitable value for the world-class resource that potash is to Saskatchewan. When it comes to healthcare, we are committed to providing the best possible healthcare system for the people of Saskatchewan. We recognize that a strong healthcare system is essential for the well-being of our families and the prosperity of our society. To achieve this, we will introduce the Saskatchewan Integrated Healthcare System. This will harness the innovation, the efficiency, and the expertise of the private sector to build out our healthcare infrastructure. Non-government private clinics would have the ability to build facilities and to provide services that meet the demands of local communities while still remaining publicly funded through government contracts. So by allowing choice and competition in the delivery of healthcare services, while at the same time retaining universal access for all, we will ensure that every citizen has access to the world-class care that they deserve. To address the urgent need for more healthcare professionals in Saskatchewan, we will open up more medical school seats and residency spots right here in the province, right here at the University of Saskatchewan. We're also going to earmark a number of those spots for Saskatchewan students themselves. We hear this all the time out of the physician groups that we meet with. Physicians themselves, a lot of times it's their kids that actually follow them and go into medical fields themselves. It's remarkable how that works, but they can't get residency spots, or they don't even get into the U of S medical college, and we just don't think that that's a good thing at all, because I mean, they're already from Saskatchewan. It's natural, if they're going to be trained here, that they would stay here. So some of those spots would be earmarked for them. So we're going to also implement a targeted recruitment strategy that focuses on attracting nurses, doctors, lab techs, and other medical professionals from all universities and colleges in Canada. We will offer a program that's very similar to the Royal Military College Officer Program, where students and new healthcare professionals will have their education paid for in exchange for a commitment to serve in Saskatchewan for a specified period of time. We understand that managing what we can manage is essential to delivering quality services and maximizing the impact of our investments. At Sask United, we recognize the vital role that parents play in education and the well-being of their children. Parents are the first and most influential teachers in a child's life, and their involvement in their children's education is paramount to their success and development. We firmly believe that it is essential that political bias and ideology are excluded from the education curriculum in Saskatchewan. Children should be equipped with the necessary skills to succeed in today's highly competitive world, emphasizing core subjects such as reading, writing, mathematics, and an accurate representation of history. Not a rewritten one, an accurate representation of history. We would remove ideology in the education curriculum, ensuring that schools are places of learning, not forums for activism and indoctrination. Additionally, we will implement standardized testing to address the current low rankings of our children in reading, writing, science, and mathematics compared to the rest of Canada. By adopting this approach, which is already used across the country, We can identify disconnects and develop effective strategies to improve grades and foster student success. By implementing these policies, we aim to create a culture of collaboration, transparency, and partnership between parents and educators. This will not only benefit the academic performance of the students, but will strengthen the connection between families and schools, which is vital for a healthy community. Since the Sask Party came to power in 2007, the size of government has increased by 41%. 41% since 2007. Scott Moe himself is responsible for over half of that bureaucratic growth in just the last 6 years alone. This growth under the Sask Party government has been focused on middle and upper management rather than frontline service staff. Under the current Scott Moe government, we have witnessed a trend of uncontrolled spending, gross mismanagement of our taxpayer dollars, and excessive growth of the size of government. We are overburdened in process after process with layers of middle management gatekeepers that add hurdles and roadblocks that make getting things done frustrating, time-consuming, and also very expensive. We need to cut this clutter. We need less government and more efficiency. Our policy of 1 in, 2 out is the first step in the right direction. We will introduce legislation where with every new regulation, 2 must be removed. And that's just the starting point. 2 must be removed as the starting point. I'm pushing for much higher than just 2 being removed. But we need a Saskatchewan where decision-making is streamlined, where red tape is drastically cut, and where every tax dollar is utilized efficiently. We are demanding accountability and results, not just big salaries and more bureaucracy. And finally, the safety and security of our families is absolutely paramount. A thriving and functioning society is built on the foundation of law and order. A Sask United government will make it clear that crime will not be tolerated in Saskatchewan. We are committed to putting criminals behind bars and ensuring that proper consequences are enforced. It's not enough to catch and release offenders. We must ensure that justice is served and that those who break the law will face the full weight of its penalties. Sask United's plan is simple. Give the people the tools, the resources, and the flexibility they need to succeed. And then we can create a Saskatchewan where families flourish, opportunities abound, and where every individual has the opportunity to build a better life for themselves and their loved ones. Thank you.
So we'll get into question and answer period. So I just ask that if you have a question, just put your hand up, then John can point you out. And if you want
or
maybe
anything,
stand up, or
if you want to add in something, then just stand up and come in. If you want to add in, that'll let me know if you want to add in.
Question so that we can get through as many of these as we can. Outside of that, ask whatever's on your mind. This is your opportunity to get to know our policies, the party. John, so we'll go from there.
First question is, if coffee's ready, it is.
That's a good one.
That's a great.
Okay, first question. Oh, this is going to be
Come on, there's got to.
All right, we're done.
I'd like to know what you're doing for national defense.
For pardon?
Defense?
Oh, national defense. Well, that's kind of a federal jurisdiction, national defense, right?
But what do you think about it?
Oh, what do I think about it? Well, I think that our current federal government is more interested in meddling in provincial affairs and municipal affairs and has completely neglected things like national defense, things like intelligence concerns, things about fostering better trade relations and all of these things that I think the federal government is supposed to have their number one focus on. I'll speak very frankly. I couldn't disagree more with Justin Trudeau when he thinks that we're a post-nation state. No, I'm a nationalist. I think strong provinces and a strong nation are great. I think that that's the only way that you can survive. This whole idea of, well, you know, we're a global community and we all need to get along and we all need to, no, I 100% disagree with that. I think what you need is you need a strong province. I firmly believe that it's strong provinces that create the strong country. Because remember what confederation means, right? Confederation means a group of strong provinces that consent to confederation. And that is where the federal government comes from. So no, I firmly believe in autonomy for Saskatchewan, and I firmly believe in autonomy for Canada. I mean, I think I know where we can go with that a little bit too is, you know, the UN, you know, dictating stuff for World Health Organization, all these big, you know, these international organizations, globalist type of organizations, you know, dictating to Canada or asking Canada to abdicate their authority to them. I think that that's the worst possible thing that you could ever do. I think, you know, we in Saskatchewan, yeah. We in Saskatchewan know what's best for Saskatchewan. And I mean, I'm a firm believer in even having more autonomy within Saskatchewan. Like what works in Estevan doesn't work necessarily in Davidson. What works in Regina doesn't necessarily work in North Battleford. And that's why we got to go back to more even regional autonomy. More regional autonomy within education, more regional autonomy even within healthcare, rather than a centralized type of approach. So that was a long answer to that. But, yes, sir.
What does Sask United go on gun control and stuff?
Yeah, okay, so on gun control, that's good. So we have a plan that a group has put together for us out in Alberta, because we firmly believe that guns are private property and as such are governed by the province, not federal, because it's private property. So, and remember, the provinces used to have, you know, full control over that. It was in World War I where the provinces were being heavily burdened with other issues. So they decided to ask Ottawa to manage that for them, and they just never took it back. So we're in complete alignment with a lot of what Alberta is doing on that front. So they should be, it's something that we can bring back into the provincial purview very easily. There's constitutional positions on that, and there's precedent with it. So basically, you would still have a license, right? Because it would be, think of it like a vehicle rather than, you know, like a gun. So it's private property, a vehicle. So you have a license to show competency that you can use it. And that's all you'd need. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What's your stance, John? It's kind of a minor thing, but paying tax on vehicles.
Oh,
tax
yeah.
on vehicles. The same, you pay more tax on what the vehicle was worth in the first place.
Yeah, no, it's bad. And I mean, I've noticed that they've even made it worse because now they don't even use a market value. They're using their own book value. And you notice how that doesn't even align up with the blue book or even the black book value? It's like their own created value. Like, I mean, you could sell a vehicle for like $10,000 and all of a sudden you're paying PST as if it was $13,000. It's ridiculous. The way we want to target that first, though, is by dropping the PST. Just drop the PST first and then start targeting from there where to go. But no, I hear you. I mean, it's ridiculous. How many times can you collect tax off the same?
You want to cheat?
Yeah, well, exactly. But now, I mean, remember before, right, where you'd write on the thing and everyone knew it was like, well, when you were a student, it was like, well, write $3,000, you know, because that was, remember those days, eh? You know, because that was the exemption. Now you can't even do that because they just look at it on their computer, yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, that's our stance on that. I mean, SGI, like, I mean, I'll just talk about the crowns. I like crowns. I think crowns are great for Saskatchewan because we are a small population, but we're heavily spread out, you know. And let's face it, you know, back in the day, if Sask Power wasn't managing our power grid, they probably wouldn't have ran power to every farm in Saskatchewan, because a lot of times it just didn't make sense to do it on the from a rate of return perspective. But we need to get our crowns back to their original mandate. The original mandate of the crown was to provide the best quality of service for the people of Saskatchewan at the lowest possible price. We have to get back to that. They're not meant to be money makers. It bothers me when I heard Donna Harpower talk about this all the time. Our, SBEs are, business enterprises, and looks at Sask Power as a business enterprise, or SGI as a business enterprise. I'm like, who's their customer? So basically, they're bragging about making money off of you. That's another tax. That's what that is. SGI is making incredible profits right now, because if you've noticed that your premiums have just gone through the roof. Your premiums have gone through the roof. But we should jump into, I'm surprised no one's talking about where you're going to find the money for PST and stuff.
Where are you gonna find the money for the PST?
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I like, because we are talking big dollars. We're talking big dollars. And people will say, well, yeah, John, it's easy to promise. You can promise the moon, but where are you going to find it? Okay, so the gas tax, let's talk about that first, the provincial gas tax. So that's that 15 cents a liter on gas and diesel. It also applies to propane to a certain extent itself. So roughly the province collects just under $500 million annually from that. It's supposed to go to roads. Folks, it hasn't gone to roads for the last 40 years. It just gets dumped into general revenue, okay? That's where it goes. But that was the original design of it. It was supposed to go to roads. 500 million, where are you gonna find 500 million? Well, Scott Moe and the Sask Party created the carbon levy program. So it's basically his own carbon tax program governed by the provincial Ministry of the Environment to carbon tax the large emitters of CO2 in the province. The two largest emitters of CO2 in the province, of course, is Sask Power, but they're exempted from his program. Oil and gas industry and the refinery in Regina. So when I had an oil company, we paid into it. And last year, that program collected $470 million. That's what it collected. So when Scott Moe's out there and he's saying, I'm fighting for you and I'm saving money on the federal carbon tax, he's talking about $25 million. Because that's roughly what natural gas gets paid to Ottawa, 25. While he collected from the large emitters of the province through his own program, $470 million. Okay, so what we propose to do is say, take the 470 and give it right back to the people by cutting the provincial gas tax to zero. Okay, and I'm not talking a 6-month moratorium like the NDP's talking about. I'm talking scrap it, because the cost of fuel affects every product and service in Saskatchewan, right? Because everything's trucked in, well, it's either railed or trucked in and trucked all around. So if you truly want to attack affordability, you attack transportation costs. The number one point of transportation is fuel. And you need to attack the PST, because the PST now, after the changes they made in 2017, apply to just about everything except groceries. Contrary to what Carla Beck might tell you when she says we're going to cut PST off groceries. The majority of groceries do not have PST on them. The only PST that is on groceries is when you buy your ready-made chicken and your ready-made salad. Or if you do grocery shopping at 7-Eleven, then you're going to have a lot of PST. But outside of that, there's not a lot of PST on that. So 3% off of PST, that's worth about $1.5 billion annually. So where are we going to find that? Two primary sources where we're going to find that. We're going to propose a full royalty framework review on potash. Potash to Saskatchewan is like oil and gas is to Alberta. That's how rare it is, that's how big of a resource it is, and that's how much in demand it is. The potash royalty framework in Saskatchewan was designed in the 90s. It was tweaked a little bit in the early 2000s. At that time in Saskatchewan, the price of potash was about 160 to 170 US a ton. Since that time, the average price of potash has been between 450 and 500 US a ton. Okay, so the price change is massive. The amount of potash produced in Saskatchewan since that time has almost doubled. Okay, once BHP comes on, it will more than double with their latest expansion. The framework has a lot of pieces, but the biggest part whereby the people of Saskatchewan can actually get value for their product. Remember, you own the potash. They have the right to produce it, but it's owned by the people of Saskatchewan, okay? The biggest component where the people of Saskatchewan can actually extract value for it is called a profit tax. And it's like part of the royalty framework. So basically you got your gross revenue minus your cost of production, here's your profit, and they tax it. The potash producers at the time in the early 2000s successfully negotiated that any future increases of potash production in the province for them would be exempted from the profit tax. So currently today, 35% of the potash produced in Saskatchewan is exempted from the profit tax, from the one thing where the people of Saskatchewan can actually collect a meaningful share. When BHP brings on its latest round of expansion, over 65% of the potash produced in Saskatchewan will be exempted from the profit tax. Okay? That's why economists on both ends of the political spectrum have been screaming about this to the government for the last 12 years. To be like, guys, you are giving away value. Okay, so then the question comes up, yeah, well, John, if you target the potash and you change the royalties, well, aren't they going to cut production or aren't you going to get pushback? Yes, of course you're going to get pushback. You wouldn't be a good CEO of Nutrien if you didn't kick and scream and push back. So of course you're going to get pushback. But this is how rare potash is. There are 3 jurisdictions that have resources of potash like Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan's number 1, number 2 is Belarus, and number 3 is Russia. Belarus, it's nationalized, meaning no other companies are allowed to come in because they know it's the goose that's laying their golden egg. So they want to manage it and they want to control it to make sure that their people get the most they can from it. And number 3 is Russia. Unless you're going to go there and pay in gold bars, you're going to have some problems doing business in Russia. That's how rare it is. That's how rare it is. So we're already coming from a position of strength. So this needs to be addressed. It definitely needs to be addressed. That's number 1. The second main area, and this is just main area, where we're going to find money to replace the PST, is the expense side of the income statement. The expense, government expense. Okay, we're going to audit every department and every ministry on frontline versus administrative costs, because they have gotten completely out of control. As an example, in the last 5 years, from 2019 to 2024, government salaries excluding pensions, I took the pension expense off because excuse me, because everyone blames pensions. I took it off. Government salaries have increased by 23% in the last 5 years. That amount of money, just the increase of 23% amounts to $1.4 billion annually. Greg brought it up to me. We were in Saskatoon and he said, John, I was first elected in 99. I was like, yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, and he's like, I'm pretty sure that the first budget I was a part of, that it was $6 billion. And I was like, $6 billion, okay. So anyway, I figured I'm gonna go check into this. Sure enough, it was $6.2 billion. In 1999, the government spending was $6.2 billion. Today, 25 years later, it's $21 billion. That's a 5% year-over-year growth, 5%. And our population has only grown 0.7% annually during that time. We have a money problem there, okay? But how you fix that is with management. You fix that within management. So people asking, well, are you going to cut services? You're going to cut this? No, we're not going to cut services. And by the way, how much worse could it get? Literally, how much worse could it get? Like you go to RUH or St. Paul's or General or Pasco to emerge, you're sitting there for 17, 20 hours if it's a stitch. You almost got to go in, like I've been saying this for years, the only way to go into emergency is virtually in an ambulance. Now even that's a hard thing. you know? So how much worse can it get? No, what I'm talking about, I'm not talking front line. That's where the issues manifest. Darren was talking about the issues manifest at the front line, but the problems are in the bureaucratic processes and the management upstream. They manifest there, but this is where the issues are. And there's only one way to fix those issues. You have to go into it, you've got to audit it, and you've got to be willing to sit down and be like, you're redundant, I'm sorry, you're fired. You're fired. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Could you comment on uranium? Because there's this talk about this, a nuclear reactor is supposed to be an elbow on this and that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Okay, so we know like Saskatchewan has the highest grade uranium in the world, right? We all know that. Like that Cigar Lake mine, highest grade. And it's a tremendous resource. To me, I don't understand why we're not enriching it here, because that's where a lot of the money is in uranium. It's the enriching part. The majority of uranium enrichment worldwide is actually Russia. The largest market of uranium is Japan. Our stuff gets sent to Ontario, enriched in the States, and then used in those CANDU reactors. But what you're talking about is so I'm a big fan of nuclear. I think nuclear is great. Why do we not have a nuclear power plant in Saskatchewan currently? Is because the big technology, like the normal, like the CANDU reactors, let's just talk about CANDU, that are, say, Bruce Power in Ontario has them. You need a large population base that's very close to it. We're so spread out. So it just doesn't make sense because, as you know, once you get uranium reacting, once you get those reactors reacting, it's not like you can just shut them down quick, right? So that's why we use coal and that's why we use natural gas. But this whole small modular thing that the government of Saskatchewan's talking about, so there's two currently in the world and they're used for research. One's in China and one's in Russia. The problem with them is the Americans are working on it. They've had two main projects they've worked on. The cost of them has gotten, in the feasibility study of them, the cost has gotten, one of them, NuScale in 2023, the cost has gotten to 29.7, I just rounded up, $30 million per megawatt. To put that in perspective, you can build a natural gas combined cycle power plant for $750,000 a megawatt. And coal, by the way, is a lot cheaper than that, a lot cheaper. So they backed away from their plan in the US, and X Energy, they're working on theirs. Currently, they're at about 25 million a megawatt, but they were 3 years behind NuScale. So you're looking at least 30 to 40 years out on that. 30 to 40 years out. That's what you're looking at. I'm a big fan that if it isn't broke, don't replace it. I'm a massive fan of that, especially when it comes to power. I love coal. What's wrong with coal? We have it. People ask me that a lot. They're like, John, how long do you want to burn coal for? I'm like, till we run out. It's what we have. We have natural gas. Yeah, we have a little bit of natural gas in the ground for sure, but we're on the right side of Alberta's pipelines for natural gas. Alberta and Northeast BC have natural gas for a long time, like a long time. Natural gas is so clean, you can cook with it in your house. That's how clean it is. So why would we go away from that? To me, it just doesn't make any sense. But I mean but at the same time, no, I do like nuclear. I think that it could be, I hope the world, gets moving more towards nuclear, but I think Saskatchewan should be there, but more from a position of course, producing the ore, but also refining, enriching it, because that's where the value is in it. But small modular, I would not bet the farm on that. Let another jurisdiction figure it out first. Once they got it figured out, then it's like, all right, we'll bring it in here, we'll utilize it because the economies of scale are there. And the other thing I get a kick out of is when Scott Moe and the Sask Party are talking about we're moving to small modular reactors. The nuclear industry is federally regulated. That's federal. Once you go nuclear, you're gone. It's federal. It takes 10 years to get a permit out of the feds on that type of stuff. Like that is, you know, and then if you want to, so on one hand, you want to talk about autonomy. Well, if you really want to talk about autonomy, then let's just focus on coal and natural gas. I mean, why they're pushing that, of course, is because they believe in net zero. Okay? We firmly 100% disagree with net zero. Net zero does not actually exist in real life. The only place it exists is on an Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't actually exist, okay? This whole idea that you can outright ban any kind of combustion, like I honestly do not think that we want to live in a world whereby, you know, you have zero oil and gas, you have no industrial agriculture capacity, and you have no, basically any type of industrial production. Like, I don't want to go back to that. We know that wind and solar are intermittent sources, and we know what happens when we add intermittent sources. They create massive grid instability, okay? Because here's how it works. Electricity flows down a copper line like water flows down a pipe, meaning they can't flow in two directions at the same time. The reason Alberta almost had a catastrophic failure in January when it was minus 38 there was because they had been investing heavily in wind and solar for the last 7 to 8 years. We don't want that in Saskatchewan. We don't want that. So people would ask, well, how do you want to fight that? Well, the only way to fight against net zero is to get to the root of the crux of the problem. The only way, in all of those federal regulations as well as provincial regulations regarding net zero are all built upon and based upon one fundamental component: CO2 being classified as a pollutant. Okay, we firmly disagree with that. CO2 is plant food. It is the gas of life. The current concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere today is 400 parts per million. CO2 concentration that's ideal for plant growth is between 1,200 and 1,400 parts per million. That's over 3 times higher than the current concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. That's why you go to a greenhouse, they have CO2 generators. They're adding CO2 to the greenhouse, okay? So that's where the fight needs to be. It needs to be about the right thing. When they took the feds to court in 2017, they knew they were going to lose. Just ask Greg, he was around the caucus table. They knew they were going to lose. Yeah, exactly.
But it made a good argument on the table.
Exactly.
I remember around the table there, Warren Stanley, Jeremy Harrison, we'll win it. Warren said, how much you want to bet? He said, well, $1. Stanley said, I'll bet you 100. Jeremy said, no. You know, Jeremy was right on the government ops. He was right
Yeah.
on that. So, no, we knew we weren't going to win it.
That's right.
But he ran on that for 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. It provided a lot of political capital. That's what it did. Because the fight wasn't about whether CO2 was a pollutant or not. Basically, the fight was, is climate change real? And if so, is it a threat? And who governs air pollution? Well, the moment air passes from one province to the next, that's federal jurisdiction. Automatic. Just the same as like a river, right? If you pollute a river and it goes into, say, Manitoba, well, that's federal jurisdiction. So that's why it was doomed to fail, you know. But people do ask me, they're like, well, John, do you believe in climate change? I'm like, of course I do. The climate's been changing since the beginning of time and will continue to change long after I'm gone. They'll even go one step further and you know, they'll say, well, do you believe that humans can cause climate change? I said, probably, because humans always have an effect on their environment. But the amount of effect, come on, we don't know what that is. And I sure as heck know that it's not an existential threat to Saskatchewan. The existential threat is actually, going to net zero. That is what the existential threat is. So, you know, most people don't realize this fact too. Like when Jesus walked the earth 2,000 years ago, it was 4 degrees warmer than it was today. And that's way before we were using hydrocarbons like we use them today. You know, so basically the climate changes. We used to call it, spring, summer, fall, and winter. Like, come on, we adapt. Let's move on, Oh, sorry, back to lithium. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, okay, so lithium is something. Right now, the lithium that they're working on is, it's basically produced in a formation, in the Weimark Formation in southeast Saskatchewan. It's in the brines. It's in the water that comes out of that. And I mean, they want to refine it. It's pretty small amounts. There is demand for lithium, but most of the demand for lithium is being met by more quarrying style of where you have a much bigger resource. I mean, it's great if there's those that want to go and invest in it, and it would be a great market because, batteries are more and more utilized all the time. So it's a great thing. But at the same time, we just got to see where it goes. Where I'm more interested is the helium market. So Saskatchewan does have a lot of helium resources, and I'm very concerned because the province, again, in order to try to spur on investment into that industry, which was naturally being invested in anyway because of supply and demand, they went out and lowered royalties for it. They basically implemented the same strategy as the potash for it. And I firmly disagree with that. I'm from the resource sector, oil and gas, It's okay to pay a fair share to the owners of the resource. That's okay. If the only way that you can make the resource pay is if you exploit it from the owners, well, you're in the wrong jurisdiction, because there'll be a better jurisdiction where that can happen. Or the commodity price should increase, and therefore you can make a return on it. That's the beauty of the market. So, Saskatchewan does have some great, I think Saskatchewan's just got an awesome future if it's managed well. If it's managed well. This whole idea of, well, we need to give away the farm because then we can bring the potash producers in here and we're so happy that they're spending the money, because I get this all the time. The potash producers right now are spending $500,000 per month on ads because of what I'm talking about. Ads, just on Rolco Radio alone. Because they know what they're doing here, okay? But I'm firmly against this idea of giving away the farm to just bring in investment. I'm like, no, the investment's gonna come because it has nowhere else to go. Our potash is exported to China, Brazil, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Those markets have exploded in the last 15 years and are showing no signs of slowing down. Because our potash is mainly used for, rice production, sugarcane, things of that nature. Those are the types of products that it's used for, okay? So it's not about us, needing it or whatever, but those markets are just exploding. So the key to ensuring that you get a good, have a good royalty framework is you need to negotiate from a position of strength. When you're walking in there and you're, it's kind of like negotiating with the federal government. If you're walking in there asking for permission, or just so happy you get a seat at the table that you're just so overjoyed, that's not the strength that you need when you're in negotiation. When you sit down in negotiation knowing that you have the jurisdiction, that if that producer wasn't there, someone else would be there, then you can get something done. And that's what needs to take place in Saskatchewan. And that's actually the same type of management. That's why I'm such a firm believer, and we need to bring private sector management to the public sector in Saskatchewan, because then we'll see efficiencies. It bothers me so much that why are we so okay with having our public sector not be performance-based driven? If you're in the private sector and you continually miss your targets and you're spending way more and you're going to go bankrupt and you're missing quarter after quarter of your targets, you'd be fired. They would fire the senior leadership team and the board and bring in someone who can hit those targets that they say they can hit. So why us in the private sector? Because when I talk government spending, they all use the term government spending because it sounds nice. It's not government spending. It's taxpayer dollars. You're the stakeholders. You're the shareholders. Why is it okay to have such crummy, crappy performance of our education system, of our healthcare system, of our roads, of all of these things that are 100% within provincial jurisdiction? Why is it okay and no one's being fired? That's what bothers me. Because In the private sector, you wouldn't last. It's performance driven. That's what we got to bring back. That's what we got to bring back to Saskatchewan. Anyway, that was a really long question or answer to lithium, but yeah, yes, ma'am.
I actually have two questions. When you talk about taking away 2 regulations for every one,
Yeah.
I would like a sample of a regulation. And my second question is, being that the Sask government took away their STC, any of their bus services, and it would, I don't know just how hard that has affected our senior population.
Mhm.
A lot of low-income families, but just a question, do you think that might be something that should be brought back?
Yeah, I mean, on the STC front, I know that like a big portion of that business wasn't just transportation, but for individuals, but it was also for courier. It was used a lot for that. I mean, there's no doubt that it did lose money every year. I would question though how much it actually lost based on the operation rather than just based on like the management of it. Do you know what I mean? But I'm pretty sure it probably lost money. I honestly though think that, you know, in society there are things like, remember when I was talking about Sask Power and how Sask Power made the investment to go and run power to farms that obviously it didn't make sense on paper. Sometimes that does make sense to do. If there is a need for it, we definitely know that our senior population is growing every year, you know? And so whether it's STC or it's some type of you know, senior transport, if there's a need for it, it should be met, because there's some things that doesn't have to be met on a dollar per dollar figure as well, right? Because that's just part of being in a community, you know. So that, and then on the 2-for-1, like anytime you're adding a new regulation, like that's typically how it works. So if you're adding a regulation to streamline, then it must replace another regulation. If not, it incurs what's a redundant regulation. So I mean, there's many different ones I could use, say from oil and gas, whereby, you know, you've got, say, a directive that has about 15 different regulations in it, and you could just shrink that down to have 3 or 4, and it just covers it covers it. Like it can happen very easily. The key to actually making that happen is by actively managing the bureaucrats on that. Bureaucrats do not like to make things simple. They typically are highly incentivized to make things convoluted and more complex than it needs to be. Surprisingly, I'm just going to pivot for a second. The Farmland Security Act changes they made in, because I read the act on my way home from Herbert the other day. We had a nice fall supper in Herbert on Sunday night. It was really good. Herbert's in my riding, so that's why I went to the, anyway. So I'm driving home, my wife's driving, and because we took the whole family and it was great. And so I'm reading the Farmland Security Act. So they added, because they were trying to address the changes they made in 2016, they were trying to address some of the issues that had happened from the changes they made in 2003. So in 2003, they kind of opened up ownership of it to, you know, pension funds and you know, private banking or, you know, private equity, private debt. More of those types of entities to be buying land. And, you know, it was definitely creating problems, and especially on the pension funds. So they decided to make the change in 2016. So they got rid of pension funds. But if you dig into the financial components, there's only 2 financial requirements. Only 2. Number one, that who's buying it is a Canadian. Now remember, when I say Canadian, I'm not talking an individual. It can be a Canadian-controlled private corporation as well, right? So Canadian. And then number 2, be a bank in Canada or a credit union, or be a financial institution. This is literally what it says, a financial institution governed under Canadian regulations. That is the widest open door I've ever seen in my entire life. Because anyone, like, okay, if you're involved with raising money, so we raised a lot of money in the oil and gas industry. So we used what's called syndicated lending. Okay, you've probably heard about it. If you're a bigger farmer, for sure you've probably heard about it. So it's a syndicate type of lending instrument. So it's a derivative. It's a lending instrument. So basically you have one bank, say it's the Bank of Nova Scotia, and they're saying, well, we're taking the lead on this $500 million purchase. And so they're, of course, a Canadian bank, so they're Czech, you know, and a lot of the other banks would come underneath that, okay, including private debt, including potentially private equity, including like I today could open up a equity firm, a private debt or a private equity firm in Canada, be fully regulated by Canadian regulations, and have 95% of my money from China. So I would actually meet their requirement. So here's something where it's actually like it's so wide open that it's crazy. I had to read it 4 times because I was like, well, that's so easy to meet. Because yes, whoever's leading the syndicate, money flows across the globe all the time, especially out of US, okay, into Canada. Like there's a lot. And so what happens is a US firm will go and they want to make an investment in Canada. Typically, they'll make the investment into a Canadian firm and then make the investment from the Canadian firm into the Canadian asset. Standard practice. Just like when you go to Mexico. You know that we're foreign nationals, we're not allowed to own land in Mexico or a place. Well, but everyone knows that you can go and get a trust agreement and own land and place in Mexico. That's what's taking place here. Okay? It's as simple as that. So when we're saying we're going to add teeth, basically what we're saying is we're going to add teeth to the Farmland Security Act and more importantly to the department that enforces it, you know, the staff behind the board, in order to dig down deeper. Because I know for a fact, if I was the Bank of Nova Scotia and I got a call from someone in Regina from the Farm Debt Review Board or, you know, part of that department saying, you know, where did the money come from for that loan in that syndicate 123857942? They'd be like, why do you care? It's good. It's Canadian. We're good. Okay. Yeah, sounds good. It's as far as it goes. Remember that Canadian institutions, as unfortunate as this is, TD was just nailed again 2 weeks ago for money laundering in the United States. Okay? This stuff happens all the time. But what bothers me is when I read that, I was like, you did nothing. Nothing. There was six different ways I thought of in about 5 minutes to get around that. You know? So these are the types of changes that need to be made. So you need to add an investigative component to the department such that they can see and list that all the way through. Because, you know, you could have, you know, 185296 Ontario Limited, which is actually an IROC, you know, supported investment firm. But yet, whatever, whether it's China, I mean, I was just picking on China, you know, but, you know, or US or whatever. You know, these things do happen. To me, it seems very naive, a little, you know, naive. So, anyway. But that's the teeth behind that. Yes, sir.
First, I want to thank both you and Darren for making the time and effort to be here tonight. And also, I think thanks due to everybody else who came here from quite far around. I just mentioned a few places, Mistosity, Lorburn, Elbow, Hanley, Outlook. So it isn't just Davidson. So thanks everybody who came to be here for this important evening. I'm just curious to how is this party doing financially? Because I know it costs money to advertise, and I really would like to see much more advertising or hear it on the radio, newspapers, that sort of thing, to educate and remind people how unconservative the Sask party has become. Like the way I've seen it, they're not nearly as conservative as too many people think they are.
Yes.
So how are we doing financially?
Well, I mean, right now we're into the last 5 days of the campaign, you know, so it's all kind of at the campaign level. But I mean, I won't lie to you, it was a challenge, you know, and it always is a challenge. Because I mean, what do political parties need? They need volunteers and they need money. Advertising's not cheap. It's not cheap. You know, heavy branding on just $650 and $980, you know, each station is worth about, what is it, $3,200 a week per station. So it's not cheap. You know, so we've done the best that we could do with the funds we've had. You know, but of course, you know, coming into the final stretch here, we're more than happy to accept any donations or any volunteers. You know, because our work here isn't done after this election, right? What's our goal? Our goal here, of course, is to win as many seats as we can. You know, the goal for me personally is to, you know, win 2 to 6 seats plus. That's the goal. Because I know for a fact, you get some of us elected in that legislature will never be the same again. You don't have to form government to make the changes we're talking about today. Because then they can't silence the voice. That once it's out on the ledge floor, it's out on the ledge floor, and we can challenge it. Honestly, like Saskatchewan has not even been a 2-party system. It's been a 1-party system for 17 years. The NDP has been a weak, bad opposition. Like, democracy only works when you have a strong opposition and you're debating things and you're coming together and you're like, you know, well, we have to make this work, and you've got multiple perspectives and they're hammering. So in reality, Saskatchewan it's been a uniparty system. Like, I mean, your majorities weren't just majorities, they're super majorities. Like, there was a couple where you guys got,
They had 9 members.
yeah,
That was it. It was like
80% of the seats.
guys on their side,
Yes,
you know, there wasn't enough room.
exactly. So that's the goal. The goal is to get some members elected. Of course, the more the better. What we're seeing, like, across the province, you won't hear it on the radio because, you know, they don't want to give any attention to us. They're now forced to have to because of rooms like this. This isn't just in Davidson. We were in Scott Moe's backyard last week in Waltime. We had over 100 people there in Waltime, right in his backyard. We were in Weyburn and had over 100. We were in Tisdale and had over 100. Like, this is, so they're starting to have to, you know, admit that there's like, wow, there is something happening in Saskatchewan. We know it, we see it because we see it on the doors. We see it with people. But yes, it takes money and it takes volunteers, and it basically takes individuals that are saying, you know what, maybe I work at a place where I can't have a voice like that because I'm concerned that I'll be fired, or, you know, or maybe I just don't have that type of voice. But you represent me, and I can get behind the voice that you have. Because I know for a fact, because I've been all over this province, that what we're talking about tonight, 85 to 90% of people agree with it, because I've seen it. This whole gender stuff, SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity and all this crap in the schools, that is the fringe minority of Saskatchewan. We don't need to tolerate that in Saskatchewan. We don't. And that's where Saskatchewan can actually lead the nation when it comes to that. So, no, I appreciate your support. Yes, sir.
Would you be open to private sector alternatives in the education system? Because maybe some competition is what the public sector offers.
It's come up a couple times. Like, my number one priority is to get the curriculum addressed. For sure. I mean, the issue on the because that's kind of like the system that they're talking about in Alberta with what is that called, the charter system, right? Like right now, say Regina Christian or even Regina the Muslim school, like Huda School, I think it's about $5,000 goes to it per student. So then there is a tuition component for it. But right now, what we're seeing in Saskatchewan is those are mainly questions that are at the urban level, the higher population centers. Like in rural areas, they're like just like, man, we just need a teacher because we don't want to lose our school. You know what I mean? So we're at that place. The whole way of addressing competition and accountability, I firmly believe, because I firmly believe this, is standardized testing. Both my parents were teachers, so education is really important to me. But the beauty of a standardized test is it brings some accountability into the system. And also, relates to, because I do get asked from teachers especially, they say, well, aren't you fearful that, you know, you're just going to have people teaching to the test? And I said, yeah, that's the point. You know, because in reality, I know what, you know, a lot of schools, they spend more time doing societal things or learning things like that rather than the reading, writing, arithmetic. Am I against that idea? No, I'm not at all about bringing competition. But I firmly believe that as a government of Saskatchewan, the number one priority is to ensure that students can receive high quality education at the lowest possible price in public schools first. And then we can go to more choice after that. So I think, you know, we'll clean that up first and then go from there on that front. So, yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about the immigration numbers and things?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I shouldn't laugh. Anyway, that's a good point. See, Danny's very helpful here because I forget things. And then, yeah. So anyway, Scott Moe wants to bring in another 150,000 immigrants to Saskatchewan in the next 5 years because he wants to hit 1.4 million by 2030. That's his goal. I firmly believe that our current immigration policy in Saskatchewan is irresponsible. It's irresponsible and frankly disrespectful to the current citizens of Saskatchewan. The reason I believe this is if you do not have, like we have citizens of Saskatchewan that don't even have a family doctor. We have schools in Regina and Saskatoon that have 35 kids in them, 95+% don't even speak English. The goal of the province is to provide these services to its citizens first. When you can provide that to your citizens, when you're ensuring that your citizens are receiving the highest quality medical care they can achieve, the highest quality education, the best quality roads, the best infrastructure, then you're good. Okay, that's the goal. Then if you have extra capacity, fine. Then we're open to immigration. Right now, our systems are failing, very obviously. There's no other way you can describe it. They're failing. Education's failing. Healthcare's failing. So by what we're doing here is compounding the problem. You'll hear other parties talk about, well, what are you going to do for the housing, you know, housing this, housing that. I find it so ironic that no one addresses the two biggest issues with respect to housing. First, addressing on the supply side of housing. Have you tried to get a development approved? They're crazy. It takes years and years of work and permitting to get that approved in a province with nothing but land. Nothing but land. Go to Harbor Landing in Regina. They build houses literally 3 feet apart from each other. You pray to God that it doesn't start on fire because the whole block will go up if they do. In a province in Regina, at least you guys have bush around here. We don't even have bush. Okay, nothing but land, and they're compacting them in like that. So address the supply side by opening it up and pushing to get more houses built. And for crying out loud, drop the PST. PST on home construction only ups the price, right? Okay, so address the supply. And then address the demand. People are saying, well, Carla, she's the, you know, I'm not picking on Carla. Well, I kind of am picking on Carla. She's the worst. So she wants to address rent by bringing in rent control. Ask the Soviets how well that worked for them. Okay? There's too much demand for rental. Why is there too much demand for rental? Because we have too many people coming to Saskatchewan. It's not rocket science. So then people ask, well, okay, John, but how can you address it? That's a federal issue. Yes and no. It's federal jurisdiction, immigration's federal jurisdiction as it relates to coming into Canada. Then the provinces get involved and they're part of the nomination program. So they say, we're going to take X number of this, X number of skilled, X number of non-skilled, X number of asylum, X number of different things like that. And then they build programs around them. Like, do you know that Saskatchewan has loan programs for immigration? So immigrants can come here that have some money and they can buy businesses. They get a loan that's interest-free from the provincial government. Interest-free. A loan that you and I On a business, if you and I went to the bank and applied for the loan, the bank would say, sure, I'll give you a loan for 5% of the purchase price. You better come up with 95% down payment, right? Okay, so there's programs that the province does. So I firmly believe that what's taking place in Saskatchewan as it relates to that, you have to build out our infrastructure first. You've got to ensure that you're serving the needs of Saskatchewan citizens, that their needs are being met. Then, with additional capacity, then you're open to immigration. Because of course I'm open to immigration. But it needs to be targeted. Yes, sir.
What are you going to do about the murder of Saskatchewan children?
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're talking abortion, I myself, the way I am, I'm pro-life. I'm a pro-life guy. It's federal jurisdiction, though. That is federal jurisdiction. There are some things that you can do provincially. Like what bothers me, this one bugs me. Okay, I got to quit saying that because you guys will think I'm just like a negative Nelly all the time here. But it bothers me that you have to wait 50 plus weeks for a knee or a hip. But you can go and get an abortion, you can get a sex change, or you can get euthanized in like a week. I totally disagree with that. So there's some priority issues there. But yeah, that's federal. That's more of a federal question. But that's why, like our party, we don't have a policy specific to abortion because it's a federal plan. We do firmly believe in our members having like our MLAs, when we have MLAs, that they can vote freely on social issues in the House. They can vote their conscience, and they can also vote, what represents their constituents. So we firmly believe in that. That's not necessarily new. I know Brad had that.
Brad did, Scott did.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing, to have that. Yes, sir.
Just wondering what the platform is in terms of addiction and social issues, because we have a lot of that in our province.
Yeah. Well, there's kind of two ways to go with that. I mean, on the addiction side, we have to address the drugs. We have to address drugs. And this relates to homelessness too, because I don't know anyone who's like 5 years old that's like, man, I can't wait to grow up and be homeless. So obviously there's other things at play. I'm a firm believer when it comes to treating addiction. I'm a firm believer in you need to have long-term programs in place. I don't think a 30-day type thing works because it's a rewiring of the brain and patterns and it takes support. For example, when I use an example of the types of programs I'm talking about like Teen Challenge, their program. I'm a firm believer in their program. They show results. It blows my mind that they're not government funded. Blows my mind because they do really good work. And there are others that do the same. But back to the drugs, we firmly believe that we need to really get tough on drugs. And more importantly, the dealers and the traffickers of drugs. We've been digging into this because it's been bothering me to find out within the system, where are the issues that are creating a lot of these problems. And when I say fit the system, I'm talking about the justice system. We all know that the criminal code is federal jurisdiction, yes, but the administration of justice is provincial jurisdiction. The provincial courts are provincial jurisdiction. The provincial judges are appointed by the province. The King's Court judges, like the highest court in the land, is appointed by the federal government. So we started to have some meetings with law enforcement on it, and even lawyers and former judges and different things like that. And we found an issue. Our provincial jails are 30% overcrowded. So this is how that plays into it. So if you're charged typically with a crime, you're going to provincial court. So again, a provincial judge. And he'll say have 8 on his docket for the morning. So he has to, see 8 charged people. And they'd let him know, they're like, well, there's 2 spaces available for you in XYZ jail. And you've got a couple spaces or one space that you can use for remand. And that's how he makes his decision. So he looks through it and he's like, well, this one, it's not as bad as that one. So I'll put him, this one, oh, this guy, I need to do something with him. So, and that's literally how they're making a lot of these decisions. It is crazy. That's exactly what it is. We can build more jails in Saskatchewan. We can solve that problem. If you want to do a P3, a private-public partnership, that I think building a jail would be a great public-private partnership. And there's downstream effects of this because this is why law enforcement, they get frustrated. They're like, okay, the amount of work that went into making the arrest and all of the paperwork and everything else just to have him go in and overnight then he's put out again. And why is he put out? Well, he's put out because there was no space for him to go. So you can't get tough on crime without creating more. We have to build more jails because we got to give the tools to the law enforcement that's there. I firmly believe, like here in Saskatchewan, we've got, because I'll just run with that a little bit, we get asked, well, what do you think of the Marshals Service? That's in theory. Maybe it makes sense in theory. My concern is it'll turn into another Scott Moe bureaucratic boondoggle. We produce in Saskatchewan about 100 police officers a year through the Saskatchewan Police College, which is located at the University of Regina. So 100, there's about 2,500 officers, including RCMP in Saskatchewan. So 100 is pretty good. I think what we would do is, of course, if we need more frontline, we can get more from the RCMP, but at the same time, we can increase enrollment. But I think what you would do before going to a provincial police force, it's always better, I firmly believe it's better to walk before you run. Let's expand municipal policing. Expand it to more, say, regional type policing. Like there's communities, for example, Melfort, Tisdale, other places that could have more of a municipal police presence. So again, that is provincial, but it's just more expanded. So we can do things like that. But yeah, I mean, the addiction stuff, I mean, I'm a firm believer that you have to actually deal with this whole idea of safe supply, and you can't just increase access and think that you're not going to have an issue from that. And I think that's what's taken place, and I think we need to reverse course on that and be like, okay, because let's be serious. We all know recovery is a choice. It's a choice. But a lot of times, and we ourselves know this, we don't like making choices that might be uncomfortable. Even for ourselves, right? Unless we face a consequence. A lot of times we defer a choice, we just say, forget it, I don't want to have to deal with this, and you defer it or you forget about it. But eventually it'll rear its head and you're facing a consequence on it, and then we make a choice. So that's what may be needed there. So that's what yes.
This is more of a human question.
Okay.
I'm only asking because politicians seem to be gung-ho off the go, and then it doesn't end up that way. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what dictates your moral code?
Well, what dictates my moral code is I have a relationship with the Lord, and I'm more concerned about what He thinks than what anybody else thinks. And And at the end of the day, you got to look yourself in the mirror, And if you betray that in and of yourself, well, then what do you stand for? I just did an interview with CBC. This is like about a week and a half ago. And they went at me for 45 minutes. And they had all of these staged callers. It was a radio show, but it was on video too. And you could tell it was staged. Like, it was crazy. And, before I went in there, I was like, I just got the sense, just own who you are. You don't need to apologize for it. Just be who you are. And if you don't get elected, that's okay, because it didn't change who you are. And I firmly believe in that. You got to be who you are. You got to know what you know. You got to stand for what you believe. The issues that we're facing, like the challenges, because, not to freak anybody out in here, but I firmly believe that Mark Carney is going to be the leader of the Liberal Party. And I don't know if you know anything about Mark Carney, but I've followed him since he was the Bank of Canada's governor. And that guy makes Trudeau look like nothing, okay? And he firmly believes this. And if you want to take a guy like that on, you better know what you firmly believe. Do you know what I mean? We're getting to a place where our politicians need to know where they stand and need to be willing to take a stand and need to be willing to, stand up and say, there's only two genders. Because there's only two genders. So that's where I've come to, I didn't even want to be here. Not in Davidson, but I mean in this, I still have a hard time when people, oh, you're a politician. I'm like, no, I'm a problem solver. Anyway.
All right, we'll do one more question. Oh, man, you guys make it easy on me. No more? We're good? Oh.
This is kind of a out of the left field question. What is the stance in terms of wildlife and habitat management and conservation within the province?
That's interesting. I've never been asked that question before. I think it's important. I do. But I also know that whole area has been hijacked in order to bring in and basically to direct capital flows. For example, we had a great thing of the Northern Gateway pipeline. Actually, it actually goes way back, but Northern Gateway pipeline. So we were going to have this natural gas a corridor flowing through, northeast BC to the coast, to Kitimat. Under the Harper government, it was approved. When Trudeau got in, they blocked it. How did they block it? They declared the Great White Bear Rainforest right through it, and then took it as federal jurisdiction. It's not new. Diefenbaker, when Diefenbaker was the Prime Minister of Canada, he had a vision for Northern Canada because he wanted to develop Northern Canada and its resources there, because tremendous mineral resources and mining resources in Northern Canada. And what the Liberal government did is, in order to block that, they went and they called everywhere through there, or a lot of places, strategic places through there, national parks. Or habitat, special habitat for this and special habitat for that. So it's been heavily hijacked in order to serve political purposes. But in and of itself, like, hey, natural habitat, like, well, ask a good farmer, ask a good rancher, how he makes his ranch work and how he makes his grazing work, and he'll tell you, well, it's because I'm working with nature here. I'm working with nature. So we understand that habitat's important. We understand that, not breaking every piece of land up and is ideal. But at the same time, you've got to ensure that it's not being hijacked for purposes of economic destruction. Great question, by the way. I think I've done 60-some town halls. I've never been asked that question.
Clean land, clean soil.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we believe in. Like, we firmly believe in, clean land, clean soil and clean air. That is our environment thing. Like, it bothers me that you have, reserves and different places or towns and, without clean drinking water in 2024 in Canada. It's ridiculous. It's because our priorities, we're prioritizing other things, whereas we need to get back to the simplicity of things. For sure. Okay, thank you.